that it's good for us in Pakistan, that at least we are crossing or we are overcoming that barrier of sea blindness. But we are also concerned about this Israel and India nexus, which is a direct threat to our national security. And one of the panelists here did mention that, I think it was the professor from Iran. He mentioned it rightly so, because it was no coincidence that Prime Minister Modi went to Israel and just 2 days before he refused to denounce Israeli aggression in Gaza, and on the other hand, he expressed very firm support for Israel, and did not take any firm position in favor of the Palestinian cause, what was happening to Iran. So I think there we are. We can only hope that humanity lives in peace, and I think the responsibility right now, at this moment, is for President Trump to retreat, not to push this world into a huge crisis, which will have even also very serious consequences for the United States. When we talk of maritime security, there are 2 points which I want to highlight. For the past few years, we have been military analysts and naval planners and strategists, military analysts have been discussing a lot about the choke points in the world, mostly in the context of, again, a US-triggered initiative of Indo-Pacific strategy. So we were talking mostly about the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea and the Malacca Strait. And yes, whenever we talked about the choke points, we would also mention, of course, all these choke points, including Strait of Hormuz and Bab el-Mandab. But now, this Strait of Hormuz has come into the limelight because of the conflict which is ongoing now in Middle East. But in my assessment, I was always of the view that Middle East is a potential powder keg, solely for the reason that is the main source of world energy supplies, number one. And number two, the presence of extra regional powers in that region, particularly the United States of America, and the destabilizing role of Israel in the Middle East. So this had to happen somehow. And one by one, if we see turmoil and chaos in leading oil-producing countries in the world. And now Iran is the target of this illegal, unlawful aggression, which has no basis, no validity in international law or within the ambit of UN Charter. So, the very fact that the US President says that I am international law, belies in the concept or the vision of a rules-based order which was constructed or developed by the very architect who is now there to sort of unravel the whole thing. Anyway, now I'll talk briefly about this Strait of Hormuz. Very useful suggestions have been made here. But I am no expert, nothing to do with maritime diplomacy as such. But as a hindsight, I can say, or as a person who takes interest in these matters, that it's good for us in Pakistan, that at least we are crossing or we are overcoming that barrier of sea blindness now. Few years ago when we would talk of the importance of maritime security or navy, uh, not much attention was paid to it. But I hope now with this conflict, nationally also the importance of Pakistan Navy and our maritime security will register here. So I think this is a very good gain for us, and I'm sure NIMA will have a very important role in near future in guiding the state policies, to meet this growing challenge. Well, whatever is the law of the sea says, and whether countries are parties or no parties, but there is a right of safe international navigation. And it is the responsibility of all those states which have this natural advantage of being at the mouth of such straits to ensure safe navigation. Of course, there is a different category of hostile, inimical sort of activities. That is a different category. But as far as safe navigation is concerned, I think that's very important. And Sri Lankan admiral highlighted how things are getting difficult, and he shared very valuable, statistics and some others also. So this is important. Iran is working, and I think rightfully so. And Iranian distinguished professor, gave very good argument in favor of what Iran is planning to do, because other countries are also charging transit fees and some kind of levy. So Iran has a right, and I think now Iran is negotiating, talking to Oman to ensure that happens. So it's a good move. Security framework for all choke points is again a very valid point, and I think within the ambit of the law of the sea or some other international legal arrangement, this thought should be given consideration. Now coming to the crisis, as I said, this has been triggered on a false premise. The very premise was false, fabricated, and it was engineered by a party which has its own grand designs in the Middle East. And because of this, and this is the second time that while negotiations were in an advanced stage, and according to the Omani foreign minister, because they were mediating, the agreement was about to be reached, and then we saw this attack on Iran, on our brotherly country. Of course, engineered and triggered by Israel, which has great design of a greater Israel. And I don't have the time, but I can, of course, I'm very clear what those designs are in my mind. In my view, of course, this crisis has long-term implications. It's strategic, and it has political, strategic, and economic challenge for the international community with attendant implications. But I think above all, it poses a very big moral challenge to the international community as to why a country which is the architect of or a spokesman of the rules-based order is going on this rackage, going on this rampage to use force against weaker countries, against less powerful countries. Because if Iran is today a victim, then other countries in the world can also become victims. So I think this calls for a very strong anti-war voice now. And I think the war is now entering into a decisive stage. We are talking here, this is an academic discussion, as to what will happen in terms of strategic implications and economic. We are all aware what will happen. But what about in the next 48 hours, what happens? Right now, looks like that the international community is, yes, diplomatic efforts are going on. And I'm glad that the world is acknowledging Pakistan's sincere efforts. But where are the other players? Where are the other actors? Where is the UN Secretary General? I would even say, I'll make a drastic statement here. Yes, UN has been marginalized because of this veto power. But shouldn't it call for a more robust response from the United Nations Secretary General? I think under the UN Charter, he has the authority to sort of, convene a meeting of the United Nations, all stakeholders, and raise his voice. At best, he could have resigned, but we don't see that kind of moral, sort of standing, unfortunately. So this is a great moral challenge. The most important thing is that whatever happens, if President Trump goes on to implement his ultimatum in the next 48 or 24 hours, I can assure you that this war can spiral out of control. And we sitting here right now, we cannot anticipate as to what shape this war will acquire. Because if we see this tit for tat, right? But there are limited reprisals in the sense between Iran and the Gulf countries. But then if this war accentuates, if this war prolongs, we could see a direct clash between Iran and key players in the Gulf region. And that would be catastrophic, with unknown consequences for the energy supplies, for food security, for displacement of civilians, even the nuclear installations. Bushehr was targeted, I think, 3 or 4 times. So, radioactive fallout. So, anything can happen. So, it is a very, very serious situation. Now, the question before the world is, do we accept this new norm in international politics? Because we are being offered to accept this norm as a new normal in international politics. What will happen to the weaker countries, or those countries who are vulnerable? It is practically emboldening Israel to carry on with its grand designs of Greater Israel. Now, as far as the United States is concerned, it's very clear that there is great confusion and disarray in the decision-making circles there. And the confusion is clear in the tweets and retweets and, back and forth. There's no coherent policy. There's no coherent strategy right from the very beginning when this aggression took place, when this invasion was made. There was no exit strategy. It was claimed that we were going for a regime change. There was a call for Iranian people to come out on the road. Good to hear from our friend in Iran that the Iranian nation is more united now. And then regime change, then it was said that already regime change has taken place. Then there is a nuclear, we have degraded nuclear capability of Iran. So if that has been done, then why carry on with this war? So it is basically the super ego of the superpower, hubris and arrogance, which is going to engulf this world into a huge mega crisis of, probably unintended consequences or consequences which have not been factored into by those who are making these decisions. So Greater Israel, of course, is, and also look, we talk about this, connectivity and trade routes. Even the United States and the European powers have floated these ideas of connectivity corridors and routes through I2, U2 and through IMAC projects. So can a sensible person think that these projects can advance even according to the American objectives if the whole thing is topsy-turvy? So I mean, there is no thinking, serious thinking has been given to this. And last point, I think we in Pakistan is of course very seriously concerned. We have our own challenges arising out of this crisis: food security, energy security, remittances from our expatriates who are in the Gulf, etc., etc. And but we are also concerned about this Israel and India nexus, which is a direct threat to our national security. And one of the panelists here did mention that. I think it was the professor from Iran. He mentioned it rightly so, because it was no coincidence that Prime Minister Modi went to Israel, and just 2 days before he refused to denounce Israeli aggression in Gaza, and on the other hand he expressed very firm support for Israel, and did not take any firm position in favor of the Palestinian cause, what was happening to Iran. So I think there we are. We can only hope that humanity lives in peace, and I think the responsibility right now, at this moment, is for President Trump to retreat, not to push this world into a huge crisis which will have even also very serious consequences for the United States. Thank you very much.